This podcast may contain explicit language. Game over, man! Game over! Aliens Revisit is next. Welcome to the Greatest Movie of All Time podcast, the show that uses a unique grading style to redefine what the greatest movies are. I'm Tom Duncan.
And I'm Dana Duncan.
And tonight, for our, 319th episode, we rediscuss Aliens from 1986, celebrating its 40th anniversary. Written and directed by James Cameron, cinematography by Adrian Biddle, music by James Horner, editing by G-Mote Hall of Famer Ray Lovejoy, starring Sigourney Weaver as Ellen Ripley, Michael Biehn as Dwayne Hicks, Paul Reiser as Carter J. Burke, Lance Henriksen as Bishop, Carrie Henn as Rebecca Newt Jordan, Bill Paxton as Hudson, William Hope as Gorman, Rico Ross as Frost, Al Matthews as Apone, Jeanette Goldstein as Vasquez, Mark Ralston as Drake, Daniel Cash as Spunkmeyer, Tip Tipping as Crow, Trevor Steedman as Wierzbowski, Cynthia Dale Scott as Dietrich, Colette Hiller as Pharaoh. Background for the movie: Aliens was released on July 18th, 1986. On a budget of $18.5 million, Aliens would make roughly $85.2 million worldwide to finish number 7 for the 1986 box office. The film generally received positive reviews from critics at the time, with some claiming it was better than the original, even if that was not the prevailing opinion at the time. Aliens was nominated for 6 Oscars, including Best Actress for Sigourney Weaver, Original Score for Horner, Art Direction, Editing for Lovejoy, and Sound, while winning for Visual Effects and Sound Effects Editing. Aliens is now considered among the greatest films of the 1980s and among the best science fiction, action, and sequel films ever made, often deemed equal to or better than the original. The British Film Institute called Aliens one of the 10 greatest action films ever. In 2009, Den of Geek called it the best blockbuster sequel ever made and remarkable even as a standalone film. In 2011, Empire called it the greatest movie sequel ever. Empire also listed Aliens as the 30th best film ever made on the magazine's 500 greatest movies of all time list. Its readers ranked it as the 17th best. In 2017, the website ranked it as the second best film in the series behind Alien. The American Film Institute recognized Aliens on the following lists: 2003's 100 Years, 100 Heroes and Villains, with Ellen Ripley as the number 9 hero overall. Although you could probably say that may have been for the original film as well, so it might be a joint thing. Regardless, the film is listed in the book 1001 Movies You Must See Before You Die. And the franchise has endured additional sequels, including Alien 3 from 1992, Alien vs. Predator in 2004, Aliens vs. Predator Requiem in 2007, Prometheus, a prequel to the original film Alien from 1979, in 2012, and its sequel Alien Covenant from 2017, Alien Romulus in 2024, and a TV series debuting just this last year, Alien Earth. Aliens currently holds a 93% among critics on Rotten Tomatoes, an 84 score on Metacritic, and a 4.1 out of 5 on Letterboxd. But of course, we can't do this by ourselves, so we bring in our returning celebrity guest, a film critic and reviewer, CLP contributor, making her third appearance on the show to date. It's the Yeast Coast Cannoli Kid. Please welcome back, Kristin Battestella!
Hello. Hello. Thank you for having me back.
So we haven't seen you for a few months since The Searchers. What have you been up to?
I can't lie. It's been a tough summer, and it wasn't exactly you guys saying, can you talk about aliens and how much time do you have? But yes, it's like I'm here. I'm coasting on decaf, but it's like, yes, we could have a chat about aliens. Oh yes, for sure.
Alrighty then. We will dive right in. So, as we started with our original episode, and I will just reference that briefly here for everybody, Dad, do you have any idea when the original episode for Aliens came out, or what order in our sequence it was released?
Season 4?
It was season 2,
Was it that long ago?
March 17th, 2021, episode number 56. So it's been 5 years since we talked about this movie.
Wow. Okay.
And we had one of our favorite guests on at the time. I think, other than my mother, the only person that's been on every single season of the show, and that would be Rob Conlon. I would encourage people. This is one of the rare times I would say, go back and listen to the original episode. Rob always does a good job. I think, for the most part, I didn't personally go back and listen to it. I like to move on with my life. But if you so choose, please go back and find that one. We will be slightly referencing at least the scores from that this evening. And if you like all of the middle space, which is usually our second section, best performances, best scenes, best quotes, that'll all be contained in the original episode. However, tonight we're going to be re-examining the scoring on that more specifically, because this is a holiday weekend, and we are celebrating the 40th anniversary of this film. So, Dad, let me start out with, do you remember anything from the original episode?
No. I guess at the time I thought I liked it a little bit more than I originally did the first time I saw it. I guess that's the one thing I do remember. But other than that, not really.
Yes, when I tried to watch it with you over the weekend, at least through the first hour, you were very, very bored. I will say that.
Yes, I was. And it did not get much better.
Ooh. Okay.
No.
Just not my cup of tea. Oh, by the way, you mentioned this is one of the great movies of the 80s. That's a low bar. I grew up in the 80s. The 80s were not a good decade. As time goes by, the 80s are becoming more and more a bad decade. At least the 70s had a little bit of kish. You know, they were tacky and it was funny. The 80s were just nasty.
I think there are many people that would argue against that, but it's okay. You can go out on a limb there. I'll clip that out and put it all over social.
That's fine. You go right ahead. Because anybody wants to argue with me, I'll be glad to.
You know, you guys love the awards. And see, that's where it starts to get me, because the 80s awards do not match the 80s pop culture that was happening at the time. So that's what's so jarring. The films that are considered the great fun pop culture, Indiana Jones, Back to the Future, you know, were not, you know, the Merchant Ivory, you know, you must see these Oscar-worthy pictures. So that 80s elitism, I think, has really fallen off when it comes to the awards. And it was a shocker, as we'll talk, that, you know, Aliens got, you know, Ripley, Sigourney Weaver getting a nomination. What?
I mean, come on. People weren't clamoring to see Out of Africa and The Last Emperor.
I know. Well, the 80s were all about greed and self-indulgence and all the things that just... The word altruism or empathy were like completely eradicated from the thesaurus during that decade.
It's wild. I mean, I enjoy Crocodile Dundee is absolutely fun and charming. But then there's just scenes where it's the 80s where she's just like, hey, everybody does cocaine. Let's just get a buzz. Whoop-de-doo. Like, it was just like, oh.
Well, that's true.
It's a family movie. But, you know, yes, there's some questions. But it's like, you know,
it's
compared to
mild
now,
drug use.
I miss the 80s. I miss the 80s.
Yeah.
So let's examine here. Dad, what is your relationship to the film, if any?
I don't even remember when I saw it or how I saw it. I want to say I was with somebody at somebody's house or something, and they were watching it. And so I watched about 90% of the movie back not long after it was released. And then we watched it for the show. And I'm like, oh, well, this is better than I thought it was going to be. And now I watched it again, and I'm like, okay.
Okay, then. I will make mine short and sweet. This is horror adjacent, and for the most part, that is not my cup of tea. As everyone knows, I am a gold-dipped wuss when it comes to horror, and so by that extension, this is now the second time I've seen it. I saw it for the original episode. I saw it for this episode. I questioned my life choices that I even put this voluntarily back on the schedule. And here we are.
Yeah.
Getting up in the morning on like a Monday to finish the last like half an hour of this movie, not how I want to spend my summer.
I needed to take a bunch of tea because I feel like I've got counterpoint here. The way you guys can speak in that these once or twice things, I mean, if I had a dime for every time I saw this movie. When I went to rewatch it, my husband was like, if there's one movie, he's like, well, wait, outside of Memento, he's like, if there's one movie you don't need to rewatch, it's Aliens, Oh, no, I've seen this movie, in no exaggeration, I don't know, 50 times. I love this movie. I never get tired of it. And I feel the opposite. I mean, I'm a horror person, but action sci-fi horror is like the third kind of choice, especially compared to Alien. It's not a horror movie in that scale where you have to be in the dark mood for it. This in some ways, there's parts of it that are almost feel good, the funny, the quips, the charm of the personality of the people. So I'm like, yes, perk me up, put on Alien. I feel like it has a lot of rewatchability. You guys don't like it.
Well, it's not our bag. I recognize wholeheartedly that there are some people in this universe that get their jollies or, I don't know, somehow relax to horror films. I just am not one of them. And then on top of it, Dana is not a sci-fi person. So this really works against both sides of us on this.
Yeah. I watched it. It was okay, at least the second half.
Not that we can't appreciate it, and not that we don't recognize its importance. It will be reflected in our scoring. It's just not our personal thing. If I gave Dana a choice between a war film and anything having to do with sci-fi or fantasy, there isn't even a choice. He wouldn't let me finish if I gave him a war film as the other choice.
Of course.
He is the dad movie quintessential. There is no dad movie that I think he hasn't met that would not appeal to him. If it's listed as a dad movie, he's already seen it.
Interesting, because in some ways I would say Aliens is a dad movie. I mean, you do have your grunts, going in with the badass,
Let me clarify. Boomer dad. Boomer dad. I think new age dads are more into Aliens. The millennial dads, that kind of thing. But boomer dads, those are the guys watching the History Channel on a random Saturday at any time, taking a dad nap to the Hitler Channel.
Although this is a boomer dad movie in the fact that this is an homage to Vietnam.
Okay, I'll grant you that. And we'll have some anecdotes to go over as a result of that as well. But is Aliens better than Alien? I think that has been the conversation. We ended the last time we talked about this franchise 5 years ago with me making the assertion that I think Aliens is more entertaining, but Alien is the better film. And I think Rob, who originally asked me that question, which is the whole reason that we even started down this path, was accepting of my answer or my response to that.
True. It depends on your mood. I mean, I don't think anybody, as opposed to, we were just laughing before we started at Peterson's Jimmy C ranking. If anybody said to you they thought Aliens was better, I don't think they'd argue with you. They say, yeah, okay. It depends on the time. I feel like I've got to be in the mood. I loved Alien. It's one of those films I probably saw when I was way too young. My mother crocheted me an Afghan when I was 3 years old. I named it Alien. I loved to terrorize my sister, with the thing, chest bursting, out of John Hurt, and everything. So I was so excited when Aliens came along. And I had a VHS. I loved it. Even when the VHS started to fall apart, it was grainy and fuzzy. You couldn't see half the movie anymore. I still loved it. And like I said, it can be feel good. It can kind of pick you up that there's funny things in it. But there was no way to go from a sequel with Alien. And they toiled with it immediately after the time, all kinds of legalese, what to do with it and everything. But you couldn't go anywhere but up because Alien is such a great, excellent slow burn horror. And I even asked you, because I didn't put Aliens on my list for the Cinema Legacy poll. It wasn't on there at all. But I had Alien very high, my top 10, like 5 or 6, I think. And to me, it was more like choosing one or the other on the list. And I thought, well, you have to go with Alien because it came first. But the way Aliens just kind of goes full on, knocks everything down. Like it couldn't repeat what Alien was going to do. And I think it really shows, as if we'll get into the franchise, the way Alien 3, I think, tries to do both. And you can't be the servant of two masters. You can't both be slow and be action paced and have, you know, all these complicated maze like sequences. Like, it doesn't work when you try both. But the way Aliens, I mean, like we say, even changes the genre. Action, sci-fi, there are horror elements in it. And you do get that whole first hour that is the slow burn. You meet everybody, everything's introduced. But when they get down to that sub-level 3 and that everything's creeping in and we know what's happening, Ripley recognizes the signs, and then it just opens up hog wild. You're like, whoa. Yes, okay, this is an action movie. Like, all right, I'm here for it. I think you can watch Aliens without having seen Alien. You know, like when she's discovered in the beginning and they do have their flash of their meeting and how many years have passed and everything. It's like, hey, guess what? If you have any questions about that, there's a whole movie of that too. But I think you can go into Aliens effectively cold.
I think that's probably true, although there are, especially early on, enough scenes that kind of draw from the PTSD of the chest burster from the original that it would be hard to have that level of impact that was in effect drawing from. So the first hour of this movie, other than kind of giving us the technical background of where we need to go, for the most part, you could probably skip over that and then just go right to the planet.
It's also the same, because I have this set, and I guess you guys have only seen the theatrical version, because there is an extended version that has a handful of other scenes in it. And you can see why they removed them. I mean, because they give you a little bit of backstory about some of the characters, a couple extra little action sequences and things like that. But it's like, you don't need them, okay, because the pace is taut enough. It is also, again, like a bonus of like, hey, you know, hey, Ripley did have a daughter, and in that 57 years, you know, she obviously lost her, and that's why she's got this extra attachment to Newt. But again, it's like, you don't need to know that's kind of a bonus. So it's like, once you see there's extras and you go back to the movie, you're like, oh, okay, that's right. There's a little extra to enjoy, but you don't need it to enjoy it.
To be fair, I don't know if I watched the extended version or not, because this, at least the one that Dana and I both watched, did have a scene describing, or at least them telling her what happened to her daughter. So it does give additional background.
And so did it have the scenes on Hadley's Hope before the aliens?
Yes.
Yeah, that's the extended edition. Yeah.
Okay. So, like, we're novices when it comes to this. And I want to say, if I go back to the original Alien episode as well, Dana may have watched the extended version, if I recall correctly. But I'd have to go back and listen.
Yeah.
But let's just put it this way. It's, whether it's Alien or Aliens, it's like choosing between your children, whichever one is the best, as long as both are flesh-eating, acid-spewing beings.
Yes.
Which, in my case, well...
Moving on.
Well, maybe that's the problem. Okay, I say this could be a dad movie, but I think there's, without a doubt, in a weird way, it's obviously also a very maternal movie and a very feminine movie, you know, very, you know, don't make mama angry kind of movie.
I just wonder, neither of us has seen any of the other films in this franchise beyond the first two. And it's very much like last week we discussed Terminator 2, which kind of similarly has the same problem, where they made a really great sequel, and to the point where nobody knew where to go from that point on or forward. It felt like a complete story, but nobody was really building on it. Nobody was world building beyond what had been done to that point. And so to that effect, I feel like it has this weird franchise fatigue. Not that there isn't more to explore. It's a similar gap that Star Wars had, where by doing the prequels, you kind of already knew what the ending was, so there really wasn't much to build on. They probably should have built their own universe, or beyond just the Skywalkers, which I guess they're kind of now doing. But nobody's really all that hard set on it because you've burned so many bridges. Similarly, Terminator, Alien, everything that they've released since then, or at least as far as I can recognize from the internet, seems to be very mixed reviews. And I just wonder, we keep greenlighting IP thinking we can just have people show up. And I wonder to a degree if we're taking that for granted, because we know, yes, they'll go to the third, they'll go to the fourth or fifth Transformers, but will they continue to go too far past that? And I just wonder how much we can go to the well, especially as we're starting to see a lot of these franchises declining.
Well, I mean, how many? I mean, Police Academy 7?
Well, okay, but those are in a slightly different class. But
that's different.
As I referred to yet another superhero film that's underperformed, or yet another Star Wars film that's underperformed, how many of these can we realistically make before we start saying we have to create brand new stuff? And it seems like the only creative genre, because it can be made cheaply, is horror at the moment. I just wonder, where are we going to go if we're going to get a revolution on comedy at some point? Are we going to recreate the blockbusters so we're actually pumping some new inventiveness, some new creativity into something else?
Horror is easy to do as far as being creative, because it's the one genre where you can take a premise and really go with it without having to spend a huge amount of effort and time developing a script. And so as a result, you're finding a lot of people who are sticking their toes in the creative pool and are able to come up with some pretty interesting concepts.
See, I can understand that to a point where it can be made cheaply because you don't necessarily need to attach a star. You just need a premise. But I feel like, especially as we get closer and closer to the eventuality that a horror film will win Best Picture again, we've now had multiple Oscar-nominated films over the last couple of years. Sinners is probably the closest we've gotten again to one winning. I think that the story and the scripts are actually fairly complete, and they're saying something beyond this. Get Out, Us, Sinners, we had The Substance. They're saying something beyond that. And at some point, an Obsession or a Backrooms, it's going to go or translate beyond just the box office to something more. But I'm waiting for that revolution to happen in the other genres yet.
The revolution, but you're getting into something deeper because you were citing, black horror films, women's horror films, instead of catering the box office to, the white fanboy demographic. And it's funny because I was thinking that in preparing for this episode, for some reason, thinking of yes, sequels were done at the time, the aliens came around. We had franchises. But I was thinking of I love the Hammer movies, but every there's 5 or 6 every time they resurrect the Dracula, the premise is, oh, this time he's resurrected this way, and this time he's going to die that way. And it's there's not that much else to it, and they're still just wonderful little films because of it. And so the idea that a sequel like this came along so massive, because Jaws 2 is okay, Psycho 2 is okay, but sequels, franchises were, and it's weird to say, few and far between, or blockbusters were just becoming a massive thing at this time. And the way these films in one way tried to cater to the audience, by the time you get to Alien versus Predator, which you're this should be the most awesome thing ever, and then it's they're PG-13 movies, and you're what are you even doing? Who is the audience for this then if they're PG-13? That's not what we want. And then Ridley Scott tried to do something different with Prometheus, and it didn't quite make enough money. They said, well, okay, you need to, and so the Alien Covenant completely switches to just trying to tie things back together and being a complete mess. So it's even if they try and do something different, it's the studio maybe that says, no, you need to meet a box office demand for this. So it is this struggle between, this idea that, and that's the difference with the 80s, as we were saying before, kind of, there was this elitism, this separate art house, special kind of films, and there were the pop culture films. And then maybe it's James Cameron's fault with Titanic, with these avatars, because at some point the film had to also be the best picture, win all the awards, and be the biggest huge blockbuster film. And so it's people were shocked when Sinners came along and was oh, this made money. We did not anticipate this because this was a completely untapped audience. So it's there's a distortion, I guess, between the cultural content or the creators and whatever the studios or box office want, because this was James Cameron still also right before the Terminator. He was working on like both scripts or something at the same time, but the Terminator hadn't been released yet when he began working on Aliens. And it was like they were like, but the story is good enough. Even Sigourney Weaver was kind of like, should I come back? Oh, this isn't a cash grab. I really like this script. This is why I'm here. And then you see the way studios fudged up and messed up Alien 3, and it's been messy ever since.
Right. And the 80s, as you mentioned, is the dawn of all of these sequels and the rest of it. I think, Dad, you know my theory on this, that usually the even-numbered decades are the lesser ones because they're a transition period going between the odd-numbered decades. We remember the 50s, we remember the 70s, we remember the 90s, but we have these transition periods where we have kind of a divide between the art house and the big budget and the blockbuster, and somehow we come back together eventually. But I'm looking forward to what we're going to get in the 2030s here, as we're just around the corner from that.
You are.
Part of the reason why we've had all these, the franchise, the rise of the franchises, is that the producers or the studios, or whichever are the ones putting up the cash, thinks that it's a safer bet to put it up in a franchise than to try to create or develop a new script. The only thing they're greenlighting are low-budget films that have a great premise and can link into the general public, and they end up producing surprises. Then all of a sudden, you start seeing a little bit higher budget and within a particular genre getting greenlit because of the fact that they have that ability and they see that they can make money. I mean, think about in the late 80s, early 90s, early 2000s, Beverly Hillbillies, The Brady Bunch. I mean, all these TV shows that were made in The Fugitive, all made into films. Why? Because
the Flintstones.
Oh God.
They all had sequels. They all had sequels, those movies. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
I know,
But
when
anyway,
I was a kid and I would go to Starsky and Hutch, or I would go to, what was it, the Dukes of Hazzard movie in the mid-2000s? Yeah.
Yep. But they had an audience, and they knew people for nostalgia would show up. And so they did these films because they were a safe bet. Now we're kind of in this transition again. And the fact is the studios were banking on these franchises because they know there was enough people to show up because they liked the previous films to get people in. It's now gotten to the point, it was kind of like supply and demand, true economics, which is you didn't have many options. So the thought was, we'll just keep throwing Marvel films out, 5 or 6 of them at a time. People will keep showing up. Well, at some point in time, people go, okay, I've seen enough, and I am not spending money on garbage. I can stay home and watch better quality television on the streaming services and get the same benefit and not have to spend money on a stupid script or a stupid premise for a Marvel film.
Mm-hmm. I mean, IP only gets you so far. I mean, the fact that these films were good. I mean, in its simplicity, you had Alien, and this is called Aliens. It's like, okay, that was enough to get you in the door. The fact that Prometheus doesn't have an alien kind of caveat to it probably hurt that film. And then they switched it back of, no, you can't just have your next sequel. It's got to be Alien, whatever you want to call it. But it's like the idea that the people came back because things were good. Hey, people like the Terminator. Hey, now it's going to be T2 and it's going to be badass. And it's like, once things aren't good, people aren't going to come back, no matter how many times. Like now they don't even bother. They just number. There's Fast 7, Furious 11. It's like they don't even need titles anymore. It's like if you don't put in the effort to even make a dang title, it's like how can we think the rest of the movie's going to be any good?
It's somehow we've gotten lost to this concept that somehow the producers are some sort of artists, that they're creators.
They're the money makers.
They're not. They're business guys who are just shelling out their money, trying to make a buck. And they'll feed into the person who's producing or directing, writing, etc., because they think they can make money. And if they don't think they can make money, they don't invest. And it's been a consistent problem in Hollywood since the early days, back in the early 20th century. It's going to continue.
I think there's a misunderstanding of what the producers actually do, if that's your opinion. I think there's the financiers, which are very different than the producers. A producer's job is even above the director to try and get the logistics of the film, secure funding, keep things going, make sure that they have craft services together, and all of these other things that the director can't focus on because they're trying to put this movie together. Then you have the financiers. From that, I would not disagree. And if it's a studio production, that even has greater pressure based on the economics of where things are at. But oftentimes, I don't see the producer, per se, putting up the money for a lot of these projects. Maybe for the original script, but they have a very different job to what they're doing.
Well, it's a catch-22 because, like you said, they do secure financing. A producer has to kiss the butts of the money and also has to placate the director. And maybe that's where Cameron lost the rails a little bit when he's become his own one-man show, I think. Because here you've got Gail Ann Hurd, who worked with him on a lot of these great pictures as the producer, where it's someone who's able to say, don't do this, maybe do that. What if you did this instead of that? So somebody who's still able to kind of polish or hone, compared to later with this franchise where I think there's just too many cooks in the kitchen, too many people want too many different things out of these movies. So the fact that I don't know, it doesn't, whether it matters or not, if they were in relationships or not, or woman in charge or whatever, I don't know if that makes a big difference or not, but I feel like you can definitely see the difference between Cameron doing Aliens and doing Terminator 2, and then when he kind of gets really bloated with the Titanics and with the Avatars.
I will end on this point. I don't think anybody should have total control over the entire creative process anyway. I understand why people get it because they've earned that ability. And to be fair, James Cameron has earned that credibility, and the fact that his movies still make a shit ton of money every time he puts out one of these weird blue people movies. I mean, yeah, of course you're going to give him carte blanche to do it. But usually the movies are better when there are more people pushing back on you, when you don't have yes people, when you have some level of opposition for people to say no, or that you have restrictions that you have to go around. Jaws is not what it is if Steven Spielberg doesn't have to work around a whole lot of things and he isn't Steven Spielberg yet. And by the same token, Goodfellas, or name your big name director with their great film or whatever else, they had some level of opposition to overcome. If you don't have that, you rarely see the great artistic movies happen. Just period. But Dad, do you have our plot summary ready for us?
I do. Ellen Ripley, Sigourney Weaver, awakens after 57 years in hypersleep to learn that contact has been lost with a colony on LV 426, the same moon where her crew first encountered the alien. Against every reasonable instinct, she goes back, this time accompanied by a squad of Colonial Marines who are cocky, heavily armed, and almost immediately over their heads.
Thank you, Dad. So what is the film about?
A lot of things, I guess. LV 426. Yeah, that's where you get the Alien Day things. That's a popular number. I think that's the name of like the Reddit groups with people discussing on talking about all the alien films. And every once in a while, people come up and say like, how did the Marines mess up so much? What was the point of that? And then I said, well, you got to pay attention to the dialogue of like, they weren't the best of the best. They're like, is this another bug hunt? I want a clean dispersal this time. Nobody's going to mess up this time. It's like they were the crap. They were the crap bottom barrel people who were sent in, backdoor in because Burke wanted the company to get this alien. They wanted this mission to go to shit. And it's like once you realize that, you're like, oh, that makes so much more sense this way. So it is this backward, yes, look at Vietnam and backward look at now it's Ripley who's like, I got to get over this. I got to be the one to save the day. So there's multiple things happening in this film that are just really, really excellent. And that's why I'm surprised you guys have seen it so few times, because I do think the more you watch it, I think there's more to see. There's lots of little things to pick up. And I feel like it keeps on giving. How many times do I think of like, why did you put her in charge? And she's like, you don't see them, fucking each other over for the percentage, and I'm thinking this is the world we live in now. The Wayland, we're run by corporations like Wayland-Yutani, right? I've been waiting for a Peter Wayland, like, pseudo Elon Musk TV show, but we're living it, so we don't need it anymore. So this film does a lot. It carries a lot that I guess it could have been just a straightforward, like we're saying, just the premise and 90 minutes and boom, that's it. But it does a lot more than that. which is really fascinating. And I feel like that keeps resonating and doing so much today. But I'm the minority with you two.
It's a revenge film. That's one, where she's going back for revenge. This is kind of reminiscent of W seeking revenge over Saddam for trying to kill his father. It's the same thing. It's a moving in, trying to do stuff.
It's really not, but okay.
It is. And then the other aspect of it is it's a maternal film. I mean, there's, both sides.
I see two thematic elements to the film. One is a sense of family and responsibility. Ripley presents her character very early on as caring of everybody. She wants to prevent some type of disaster from happening to the planet, to people generally. Now, that gets targeted or funneled eventually into the members of the crew, and more specifically to Newt, as she kind of takes over this matronly duty, but it's her general altruism to try and prevent the worst possible outcomes. But that's in complete contrast to corporate greed, which I find to be the central theme of at least the first two movies, which I would guess has been really lost by subsequent sequels, is this dichotomy of where the company has really heavily invested in, we need to control this substance, this creature, whatever else, and at all costs, we're going to sacrifice a few people, a crew member, whatever else, because we can make a significant amount of money from this. And so where the two things are in complete opposition, the altruism that everybody's life is important, that the betterment of mankind is more important than corporate profit, I think is the central piece that really motivates the film here.
And it's not?
Depends on whom you ask, I suppose.
Yeah. Well, it's like it's funny you say it of the first two, because after that it becomes reality. They want to churn these things out. The Fox wants to make money off of these films, so kind of the corporation becomes the reality, and you begin to lose the humanity, the substance, and that becomes my problem with James Cameron. When the special effects begin to take over what's at the core of the humanity. I mean, when I saw Avatar, and when Ripley is leaped into her blue gear coming out in her fight, I almost expected her to say, "Get away from her, you bitch." When I saw Avatar, I thought he's ripping off himself at this point. But you're right. Like Ripley starts out as not necessarily meek, but she's the one who's got the experience with this, and she wants to help everybody. And even when they find out Burke is nasty, and she says, "Well, wait a minute, he's got to go back too. We still have to help him." And then it's when Newt is taken, and you get the real time countdown. You got the voice going, this is decontamination is going to happen in 15 minutes, and she's going back in and it's counting down. That's when she just kind of unloads her rage, and she just lets it all out, and and to try and save everybody. And if you guys pay attention to the whole end credits, you do hear the face hugger kind of creepy crawling during the credits. So it's like, well, she probably didn't succeed. The corporation probably still did win, but and that's just that there's a hopefulness to it, but there is also kind of a cynicism or bitterness to it, which speaks to, I guess, both the highs and the lows of the 80s and again to now.
Well, think about it. The corporate representative ends up getting eaten by the effort he puts in to preserve.
Yeah. And even the aliens, and the fact that they already have named them, well, there's no problem there, but we'll call it a xenomorph. Like, they already know more than they're saying. And it's the one with the little helmet. I mean, which today I feel like there would be a lot more penis jokes, all the sinewy, all the goo, and his little helmets. When he's first on the ship, and that's just the pilots, and it's almost like the little alien is smiling. And then when he's the one, it's like when you recognize in the whole film all these massive creatures, when you recognize the one that gets Burke, there's a little part of you that's like, yes.
By the way, where the hell was he going? I mean,
just trying to escape himself, just being
trying
selfish.
to escape from where or how?
And again,
you're running away from those who potentially protect
and people say that on Reddit. They're like, well, why did he do this? Why did he do that? I'm like, because he's an asshole. His whole goal was to get a sample back, get Ripley and Newt impregnated, and come home with them for his own material gains. And yeah, guess what? It eats him. The quest literally consumes him, shall we say.
Yeah.
Did you know? When filming the scene with Newt in the duct, Carrie Henn kept deliberately blowing her scene so that she could slide down the vent, which she later called a slide 3 stories tall. James Cameron finally dissuaded her by saying that if she completed the shot, she could play on it as much as she wanted. She did, and he did keep his promise. Kids just want to have fun. Did you know? Bill Paxton continuously apologized to Carrie Henn throughout filming every time Hudson had to swear in front of her. Henn later admitted that she didn't mind, mainly because she didn't really know what any of the words meant. Years later, during cast reunions, Henn had grown up so much that Paxton didn't recognize her at first. Did you know? Sigourney Weaver had several notes for James Cameron after having read his script, which were mostly about how she felt Ripley should respond to her situations, which he was happy to accommodate. Cameron praised her for never taking issue with the direction he wanted to take with the story, even with the points they couldn't agree on. One of them was the amount of gun violence. Weaver had initially focused on the script's dialogue rather than stage directions, so when she arrived on set, she told Cameron that as an advocate for gun control, she was uncomfortable with all of the shooting. Cameron felt that this was perfect for Ripley, who was equally reluctant to use a gun unless forced to, and told Weaver to bring that attitude to her performance. He also took her to a gun range to try and fire an automatic gun, which she had to admit was pretty cool. I've fired a gun, still don't like them. I'm good.
You have to get used to them. You have to be familiar with them. Yeah, they're loud. They can be heavy. They can be a problem. Yeah.
Just not my thing. Never will be.
No. Mm-mm.
Did you know? When Fox execs saw an early cut of the film, they complained to producer Gail Ann Hurd that it looked like the money had all been spent on sets rather than special effects. Hurd took great delight in telling the execs that a majority of the sets that they were seeing in the film were indeed miniatures or optical effects, e.g. special effects. The artists behind these images were very pleased that their work had fooled the money men.
Practical effects, folks, please. Yes, come back.
Did you know? Al Matthews, who plays a Marine sergeant in the film, was in real life the first black Marine to be promoted to the rank of sergeant in the field during service in Vietnam. Also, Lance Henriksen is a U.S. Navy veteran. And finally, did you know? The Alien Nest set was kept intact after filming. It was later used as the Axis Chemicals set for Batman from 1989. When the Batman crew first entered the set, they found most of the alien nest still intact. And with that, we will take our first break, and we'll be right back. Before we jump back into the episode, next week for our 320th episode, we discuss Legally Blonde from 2001, celebrating its 25th anniversary. Directed by Robert Lukatich, written by Karen McCullough Lutz and Kirsten Smith, music by Rolf Kent, edited by Anita Brandt Burgoyne, starring Reese Witherspoon, Luke Wilson, Selma Blair, Victor Garber, and Ali Larder. You won't want to miss that one, so watch ahead of the show by searching the Real Good app to find where it's streaming for you. That's REELGOOD. And before we get too much further, Kristen, what is going on with you? Where can people find you, and what have you been working on?
I'm mostly on Blue Sky at Therefore Review. Been on a little bit of a podcasting break. Things have been kind of crazy scheduling health and podcasting doesn't always cooperate at the same time. We've had this date set for a while that I could rant about aliens. So trying to get a few deadlines done, but trying to take it easy this summer. There's enough crazy things happening. And then watching Aliens again, and I feel like that Leo gif, just pointing at everything like, yes, this is us now. This is us now. Yes, look at us now. No. So.
All right, so then let's move into the Stanley rubric for the evening. And as I mentioned a little bit before, if you are new to our revisits, which we do mostly on our holiday weeks, it's usually a slightly shorter episode, so yours truly doesn't have to edit quite as much, then that means that we skip the middle section of what we would normally do in the show, where we have best performances, scenes, quotes, and some of those other things that we would normally discuss in a regular episode. And we're just going to focus on the Stanley rubric, especially because you can go back to our original episode from Season 2, Episode 56 in 2021, and catch everything that we had to say on this movie. So that being said, we'll move right into the Stanley rubric. We'll start with legacy, as we always do. This is a measure of the legacy of the film approximately 5 years after it came out, so roughly 1991 to today, over the last 35 years. What is the legacy of this film as shared between two equal yet separate groups, the industry and the audience? 5 and 5 points apiece for a total of 10. Dad, would you like to go first or second?
I'll go first.
Okay.
I think from an industry standard, it set kind of the standard by which sequels are done, having to have a solid script, special effects overall. So I'm going to give it, for the industry, a 5. Where it loses is in the public, because it has to compete with its prequel. So many of what people remember from the film are the exploding from the stomach and all that, which was in the original. So it's not quite as memorable. So I'm going to give it a 4.5 for a 9.5 overall.
I have this at a 4.5 and a 4.5. I think from an industry standpoint, it's significant, but let's not overweight it either. I think it has respect. I think it has a certain level of significance as to how sequels were made. There are a lot of sequels and action films that are taken off of this film, particularly something like Predator. Feels like it owes everything to this movie specifically, because you're going out into the middle of the jungle, you're fighting a unknown beast of unknown origin realistically, and it's going to pick you apart until one person is really remaining, and then they're going to go ham on everything. In Predator, it's Arnold. In this, it's Ellen Ripley. So there's a slight difference there. It's less machismo and whatever else. I think this is a much better and well-crafted film, where Predator just... God, that feels so 80s. Anyway.
I still love it. I still love that one.
To each their own.
Two governors in one movie. Hey. Bonus
Okay.
points. Sorry.
Still not for me. But that's beside the point entirely. So I'm going to go with the 4.5 and the 4.5 for a 9 overall.
I have to let my bias show here that I'm still feeling a 5 and a 5. I feel like for so many years, this film, like I said, with Aliens just setting this bar, and then Cameron blowing things away with Terminator 2, like, as we said, the industry continuing to copy this, and just things seeping into this cultural lexicon. Game over, man, game over. We're still doing all the quotes. Hudson, sir, he's Hicks. I was driving today at some stupid driver, yelling at them, and I'm going, let's move with a purpose, people. And I'm like, Hicks, all right. There's this, get away from her, you bitch. I have Christmas ornaments of this movie. It is, and it's like spot the xenomorph for the Christmas tree. My mother's like, ew, that hideous thing. So I do feel like it is still in all our cultural lexicon. It's seeped through everything, and the industry is still borrowing from this, whether it wants to acknowledge it or not. I think, as we'll probably get into more to the next score, like, I feel like the further away the industry gets from this movie, and the further away an audience loses it and forgets about this movie, I feel like that's when films begin to suck. So for me, it's still a 10 total.
Well, I'm in the middle, people, so who's going to come to the enlightened position?
The enlightened position. Oh, yeah. Okay. To be fair, to explain what he means by this, as opposed to how our regular episodes go, we do negotiate these final scores on the revisit. So we have 3 offerings out on the table. Dana is correct that he is the midpoint. Theoretically, that would be the easiest negotiation point. I should also mention that our original episode had this at a 9.33, so it would be a slight bump up from our original scoring.
So even if I go along with the crowd, what you saying? If I go along with yous guys, as we say, it actually still bumps it up.
Yes.
From where we originally had it, that is correct.
See? Okay, see, I got it. Yeah, okay.
That's if I'm willing to comply.
So I guess I could agree. I have to bow, I suppose, at some point on some of these. I didn't realize I was going to be the one biased defender tonight.
Well, we always have to have somebody that kind of counteracts our narrative, per se, especially because Dana and I agree on so much, or at least are fairly close on most of our scoring. That being said, I think that your 10 naturally has to come down, because you kind of even argued against it there at the end by saying we've moved farther away from these movies. They have less legacy. People don't necessarily, like, the distance is creating further problems. And that was kind of my point with going with the 9 here, is as we get further away, it has less of an importance. One, in the industry, where I think the initial impact was much greater, and 2, the audience just doesn't see it nearly as often as they used to. I think when we had Rob Conlon on originally, he talked about it being somewhat of a cable movie, that every time it was on TV. But that idea is kind of gone or dying. And even though I think this franchise still has juice, there are plenty of people that love Alien and Aliens. Obviously, if we're going to put out a TV series, there has to be something to that. But how much? And so that's why I think a 4.5 on both sides is still warranted.
But, I mean, after all, how long has CSI been on?
And
so
what does that have to do with the price of tea in China?
It doesn't matter how many people love it. Some people just will continue to watch because they don't want to get up and find the remote.
CBS aside has still nothing to do with an FX show that I
the irony of the Alien TV show having Fox Disney overlords.
I'm assuming you feel emboldened that you're not going to move off of your 9.5.
No, I'm not going to move off.
I can come down to a 9.5.
I took a reasonable position.
Oh God.
Because I think some of my negative things are going to apply to the next score. So I can acquiesce, I suppose.
I will concede, but I still think I was right.
Did IQs just drop sharply while I was away? No.
Then let's move to impact and significance. This is a measure of the impact and significance among those same two groups that we had from the last category, the industry and the audience. But instead of 5 years after to today, as we did for the last category, this is from the original release date until that 5-year period. So we're only dealing with roughly 1986 to 1991. What is the impact and significance among the industry and the audience? 5 and 5 points apiece for a total of 10. Dad, on the original scoring, we had an 8.5. I think that we got this slightly wrong. I think that maybe even in my own opinion, well, I don't think that the audience for this is as significant as it was maybe even a little bit after the fact. I think it is higher in the industry than I gave it credit for in the moment. Couple of things in its favor. One, it's one of the few horror films of this generation era that had some significant awards attention. Even being a science fiction film, which was somewhat getting rewarded, like Alien was nominated for some Oscars, Star Wars was nominated for some Oscars, Back to the Future was nominated for a few things here and there. So that wasn't strange, but the horror film was still seen as lesser. And so for this to take kind of both of those as the leads, and yes, it did win really only for technical awards, and it wasn't nominated for more than technical awards. It wasn't nominated for writing, but we did have an acting nomination from this. I think that is somewhat significant in normally an overlooked genre in the context of the period in which it came out and was made. Additionally, I will also say, again, thinking of this as an archetype for sequels, particularly for action movies, much in the same way we gave credit for Die Hard being the pitch or the elevator pitch going forward for like the next 10 to 15 years of every action film. Oh, this is Die Hard on a bus. This is Die Hard on a mountain. This is Die Hard, in your backyard. I don't know. Everything was related to that so people could understand the concept. I do think that there were several team-up action films that were pitched on the back of, this is aliens in the jungle with a random thing. And that's how Predator got made. Because that's the one I see the most in here. So by that extension, I give this a 5 on the industry. I move it slightly down to a 4 on the general public or the audience. And I still have a 9.
Well, I will make this easier. I'll just agree with you because I had just a slight variation and I'm not going to argue about it.
does make it easier. I mean, was that so hard?
Industry, I would still give it a 5 because, as you're saying, yes, such impact. I mean, to be an action sci-fi horror film and everybody wanting to copy it in its wake, yes, it had the below-the-line achievements, but the fact that Sigourney Weaver was nominated in the same year for Aliens and Working Girl was like, oh, wait a second here. We need to pay attention to some of these performances, that there's a meaty substance here happening in these films. Like I said, this could have been, a fast, there was Alien copying other movies that were just older, low-budget, 90-minute kind of knockoff kind of films where it's in and out and, very thin, pared-down movies. The fact that this movie is so deep and she kind of anchors this whole thing, and there's just, like I said, so much personality to it, so many multiple layers and things happening. So like the industry latched onto it, but then at the opposite for my audience, that's where I want to do like a 4.5 because I feel like at the same instance everybody loved this movie and it was so great and it was so huge, and then it was VHS staples and it was repeated everywhere, that maybe there was almost an audience fatigue that kind of set in, and then you got Alien 3, which I think sullied a little bit of this, of kind of like, because everybody turned around and went, oh, this wasn't as good, and we liked that one better, and I think that's where things got iffy and get hurt. The way Cameron's answer to Aliens in many ways is actually Terminator 2. He was like, but wait, I can take it to the next level again. So the legacy right after, I feel like, was kind of a little more sullied compared to now, where it's like that's why I wanted to give the higher score earlier, of like, no, everybody looking back and saying, wait, this movie is just still awesome. So there, I feel like there was a really give and take. It advanced the industry, but did it burn out too fast? And again, to think now our industry like burns out within months. The fact that these films had long box office runs, they made good money at the box office, compared to now where it's, oh, a film's in 2 weeks and it didn't do its money, oh boom, but just dump it on streaming. So I don't know, the industry has changed so much, but I would say, yeah, still a 5 and then a 4.5. So do the math.
Okay, so you're at the 9.5, we're at the 9s. One thing that I didn't really cover all that much was the audience in my earlier commentary. I was more talking up the industry portion of it to the 5. But I guess if I have to argue against that, because that seems where we're in disagreement here, I would say it finished 7th overall at the box office in a year that was not particularly great. You had really 2 big movies, Ferris Bueller and Top Gun, and it finished below some other ones that are relatively forgotten. So by that extension, I would say that this movie did have some success. Like 7th at the worldwide box office is not a bad thing, but it's not against where we're weighting this heavily. We feel like it's a cultural phenomenon. I feel this is much more of a culty film that built over time and repeated viewings than it was in the initial moment. Where that took over, I don't know. It could be the 90s, and if that's going to be the case, then this is after that 5-year window. So I put this more in legacy for me than I do necessarily in that immediate window. And that's the difference in the 4.5 moving down to a 4 here.
I think a lot of that had to do with this was an R-rated movie. They were going to make the hardcore movie they were going to make. Now today, again, like every time something's PG-13, I'm like, there's still a little part of me that's like, you're not as badass as you think you are if you're just going to be a PG-13 movie. So I can agree with a 9. That's still higher than what your previous score was.
That is correct. We moved up from the 8.5 and we settled then at a 9. Finally, before our second break, we'll move to Novelty. This is a measure of anything original having to do with the film, as well as the execution on basically anything in the film. This is not something that we had split the category on until last season, so the original scoring on this one was an 8.33. That was just simply out of 10. Now, as we've gotten more nuanced with the category, it'll be interesting to see where we apportion this. And since Dad normally goes first on Classicness, I'll start here. I think that even for a sequel, while I can't give it full points because it is somewhat borrowing on the universe, it is using some tropes. And while I've given some sequels, notably The Empire Strikes Back, credit for world building and expansion, I don't feel like this world is all that much more expanded. More of they just ratcheted up how many or the volume, and thus why it's aliens, plural. And really the only primary character for which we get an expansion on what this universe is the queen alien with that look and the larger head and all of the things that come with it in the last half hour of this movie. So I'm going to give this a 4 on originality. I think it does a good job with the script. I think it has a good story more than just the plot, because a lot of action movies just kind of become plot heavy. They're moving from point A to point B, but this seems to have some additional substance. It's about something, which is usually my complaint about a lot of action films. It's just running, jumping, shooting, and we don't really have any substance behind it. Where I think this does suffer a little bit for me is it's got that 80s camp to it a bit. And for some people that works. For me, a little bit less so. And the action-heavy stuff doesn't appeal to me as much. It also, from its special effects, while it's not as dated as some things, I'm thinking the original Terminator feels much more dated than what this movie is. Noted, this comes after the original Terminator, so you're 2 years removed. He has a slightly bigger budget. He has more to work with. They put some time and effort into this movie, but there are some things in here that just look a little bit more dated. And the acting in some of these, not always the best. Like, Sigourney Weaver's doing her best. Carrie Henn's doing her best. Paul Reiser doing his best. But there's a hamminess to most of the Marines that's like, okay, really? I mean... So with that, I gave this a 4 on the originality. I have it at a 3.5 for the execution. I probably am a little bit low and can work around that, but that's where I'm going to start.
I'm going to start with the execution. I think Cameron did a very good job. I think that the performances were good. I think that the homage to Vietnam, etc., was well executed and such. So I'm at a 4. Where I'm having a problem is, it's the novelty. Night of the Living Dead, The Thing, The Alamo, Rio Bravo, Zulu, all films where it's everybody is under siege and they have to fight their way out. You could even say Platoon because of the Vietnam aspect of this.
Well, that is the same year, I think, though.
Yeah.
Is it not?
I don't remember.
It wins.
But we could.
I thought it was
we could
86.
go with a couple of different Vietnam films, Vietnam War films from that time frame. But anyway, the point being is I don't think it's that novel, other than the setting. And I can't give it too many points up for the setting since it's a sequel. So I'm at a 3, so I'm at a 7.
Okay.
And no, see, that to me that's low, and because I thought I was going to be fair. The novelty to me is I was going to say a 4 because yes, it is a sequel. If you do pay attention to it long enough, I mean, it does still borrow a lot from Alien. You do have that first half that is very simmering. You're basically waiting for an alien to appear. Get the fake out dream little shot kind of in the beginning. But, and yes, although there is a lot of big things happening and we are, in a big spaceship thing and the drop ships and everything, it is very self-contained and it gets tighter and tighter and tighter as it goes on. They just keep getting locked up and locked up and locked up. And, at some point they're counting down 6 feet. She's like, that can't be, that's inside the room. Like, that's how close that it actually gets. So it becomes a very congested film, and you're kind of like, okay, that's just like Alien, where it's just down to her and her little undies, in this little self-contained thing with this massive alien. So it still does borrow a lot, yes. And for the originality, I was going to say 4.5 because yes, there are a few dated things in it. Like yes, her campy little 80s little sneakers, like yes, they're so badass. And then she's like, look, I'm wearing my little 80s sneakers, my little 80s little jacket and everything. And there are times, especially like when I'm watching here, I like the anthology set. I feel like there is another Blu-ray edition or maybe a 4K that's maybe Cameron fudged with or messed up, tried to correct things or change the grainy thing or something. But sometimes, yes, you can see some of the effects with some of the queens kind of puppeteering and everything. And there's that same scene where they're saying that it's 6 feet, how can they be inside the room? And it's so funny because it's, to me, one scene, the best and the worst of the film at the same time, when she says, you know, we looked everywhere, we secured everything, and then they look up. And that's when there's just the beeping of the tracker and Hicks turning with the light, and then you see all the aliens like come crashing it down in through the ceiling. And if you're a weirdo like me and you pause these scenes or take screen captures, you look at that and you can see all the fakeness of these aliens, the people who must be doing animatronics, the prosthetics, the puppeteering, all the fakery, that, you know, just random spray painted tubes or something. I don't know, however they'd made all this onslaught of aliens. And if you look at it like that, you're like, yeah, that looks kind of silly. But when you're in the scene of the movie and that it's nothing but this pulse beat, and it's like, here they come crashing in and they are all in and on top of everybody. So it's like, I love the film for what it is, but it's like, I can see that it's like, yeah, okay, maybe if you weren't there in the 80s, you wouldn't appreciate some of these funny, hokey, hammy things. So I said a 4 for novelty and a 4.5 for originality. Is that my wording? So what is that?
So that's an 8.5.
8.5, yes.
And I had a 7.5, and Dana has a 7.
Do the math. Let's just round it out to an 8. It will be nice. Although
round it out.
But that'll actually be lower, see, than your original score. So see, I could be nice. I can go with the flow.
Well, we weren't accusing you of being rude or anything.
No.
This is the movie. Yes, this is awesome.
I did give the original score on this was an 8.33 at some point, I hope.
Yes.
So if I didn't, I just did. But that being said,
we can keep it.
I feel like Dana's going to make a bigger argument on it. So as the midpoint, I'll let you two duke it out.
But you guys are not big fans, but you also haven't seen the rest of the franchise. So when you see the flaws of the rest of the franchise, and then you come back, to Aliens, and you're like, no, you know what? No, this is awesome. This is good. I can forgive. You know, yes, it borrowed from its source, and yes, it did some hokey 80s things, but it's still awesome.
So in other words, if we make Ishtar 2, and it's even worse, then Ishtar 1 is now a classic.
And think in comparison, because look at all these Marvel movies today. It's like they're all the same thing over and over again. They're just, you know, and they don't work and they don't hold up. Well, I guess that's the irony, is we're debating the originality and the novelty of this. It's like, but in comparison, Aliens is a unique film compared to some of the stuff that's being rolled out right now over and over again, even to its own franchise, kind of copying things. So,
I'm feeling really comfortable with my 7, which is, I don't think it's that original. I think that giving it a 3 for originality, I think, was generous, and I gave it a 4 on execution. And quite frankly, there was some portions of this where the set, I didn't think it was believable.
And you guys are also watching the edition with the extra footage too, which may have hurt your viewing because that's not as taught. And yes, there's scenes that were added back. Maybe you don't need to see the Hadley's Hope beforehand. You can go into it cold. Because again, you're waiting for the aliens payoff. You know, when they get to that sublevel 3, when you finally that question in the film. So who's laying these eggs? When you finally see the queen. I mean, I feel like the payoffs of the film make up for any of the flaws.
I'm more tempted to go to the 8, Dad, than I am to the 7. So you're gonna have to move off of it.
You'll thank me when you see Alien 3.
Okay, so we've got him up to the 7.5.
It's a shame because this is basically Cameron doing his own thing. Like, I think the studio initially demanded those cuts and they wanted it to be under 2 hours. And he said, I'm not even going under 2 hours. He said, I got to have however long the film's going to be. I'm not worried about how many times it can play at the box office. But then when you get to Alien 3 and you have Fincher and they wanted to change all the designs, and you got a completely different movie, and it's all completely messy jumbled. Like, they wanted to make it like a low-tech monk planet, and they're like, no, you can't go low-tech, you know.
All right, I'm going to make a ruling here. This has gone on long enough. As the
7.77.
I was tempted to go there until somebody tried to argue, well, in relation to all the other shit movies, this movie has to be better. I'm like, judge the movie on its own merit. So, no, we'll stick with the 7.5. I'm just making the ruling. All right, so that leads us to our second break. We'll be right back. Before we jump back into the episode, and before we get to the Stanley Rubric in a minute, if you're ever curious about our Master Greatest Movies of All Time list that has every graded movie we've ever discussed on the show, there's a link in the episode description of every episode of this show, or you can go to RonnieDuncanStudios.com and find it as the top entry on the Greatest Movie of All Time podcast show page. That has the grades we've done so far for all 288 movies we've graded, and we continue to add more each week. Make sure to check that out as we go and follow along. Dad, do we have anyone to remember this week?
Yes. Tom Ligon, 85, American actor, Paint Your Wagon, The Young and the Restless, and Bang the Drum Slowly. David Clayton Thomas, 84, British-Canadian Hall of Fame singer from Blood, Sweat, and Tears, songwriter, Spinning Wheel, and was a Grammy winner in 1970. Clive Davis, 94, American Hall of Fame music executive with Columbia Records, record producer, founder of Arista Records and J Records, four-time Grammy winner. Des Nealon, 90, Irish actor, Educating Rita and Reflections.
I think the only one of these four that I have any sort of significant relationship to is Clive Davis. It's a guy that you might recognize or might have heard of, but he's usually the guy behind the guys. And so by that extension, he is so tied in with so many major artists of the 80s, 90s, probably even the 2000s, that we've all heard of, we all were appreciative of, that it's hard to separate him from all of those. I don't have like a categorical list next to me, but his influence as a musician, producer, I think is significantly high in the history of at least modern music or modern pop music as a result. And so we remember these here fondly for their contributions to the arts with a moment of silence in their honor. Thank you. All right, let's move back into the Stanley Rubric. We left off at Classicness. This is a category that is well defined by how well something has aged or not. Instead of a midpoint being a 5, our baseline starting point is a 6 for this category, as in theory we thought it would be easier to take points off as things don't normally age gracefully, like my partner over here, and instead that it would be easier to take points off than it would be to add them on. As such, I don't know if that is necessarily how it's played out in practice, but we continue on for at least the duration of this season. So starting at that baseline of 6, because this category lives in the gray, we turn to our graying senior nuance correspondent, emphasis on graying and senior, Dana. I will tell you, though, that our original Classicness score on this one was an 8.83.
For the most part, there's some problems with some of the special effects, but not huge amounts. And the fact that, again, this is a mother's movie. Mother of the aliens versus mother of, representing the human species and their ability to try to protect each other makes it an interesting story arc. I'm going to give it a point up for the timelessness of the special effects, and I'm going to give it 2 for the fact that Ripley, even though it's a sequel, still is a badass. So I'm at a 9.
I take all of your points, What I'm going to also add, in addition to this being somewhat of a female empowerment movie, so it is somewhat progressive on that action, is the universal theme of corporate greed. So I will add that addendum to it, which I think is still impactful. You mentioned the special effects, but on the flip side, this movie is terrifying in the moments it needs to be yet. I don't think it's lost its impact there. And in the moments that you need it to be thrilling or gratifying, I still think it works there. Adding on the fact that horror as a genre has appreciated in value, and this film is a standout among those because, again, it is about something. I have this actually at a 10.
Oh my. Now I'm kind of torn because, of course, my initial reaction was, okay, I could be fair with a 10. And I thought I'll be happy to come down to a 9. So I'm torn now. Yeah, it's in a weird way. It's strange to say this is a women's picture. Because, again, and if you're thinking of Sigourney Weaver being in Working Girl, because Working Girl was like the women's picture, you know, women of the 80s. But the idea that we're trying to do that kind of film today and it's just not quite working, that we're not able to have badass women on screen somehow. And this was, you keep saying a horror movie. To me, this is like action sci-fi horror. Like horror is more the third genre of this. So where horror did have a history of a final girl kind of thing. So the idea that this is a women's led movie in what was traditionally at the time a male genre, I think is very progressive and very lasting to this. And even some of the special effects that even I can admit that, yes, okay, sometimes you pause, you will see bad things, but the film, and this is where I in the future lost Cameron when the special effect becomes more important, because, and again, there's wonderful scenes in Terminator 2 where there's all kinds of lambasted, all kinds of action things, and it's still worried about 0 kills, nobody got hurt. And this still has the humanity in it. It's not a big panoramic, inspiring, like hero landing moment when we see the Queen. You know, it's a very quiet, sinister kind of moment. So it's still about the core one-on-one kind of battle here of dual kind of women. So I mean, I wanted to say 10, but I could acquiesce to a 9. That would still be higher than the original score. Because I still think this keeps on giving. Like, even that I didn't include this on the cinematic legacy poll, to me it was still, well, if we were doing 100 instead of the 50, you know, I would have included it. But
I have to defend the 10?
No, well, yeah, no. Or we so if there's 2 10s, does that automatically mean 10?
No, we still got to bring him up, but I thought I made a fairly credible case.
Yes.
I'll give you the half point more for corporate greed, so I can go to a 9.5.
9.5? Okay.
I think that's fair.
Yeah.
I think I was going a little bit out on a limb, and this is not our prototypical classic 10, but I thought there was at least an argument to be made. So 9.5 is satisfactory, as far as I'm concerned.
I've moved up in the world, because previously I was here for Ben-Hur and The Searchers. I tend to not deal with a lot of recent modern films, so it's like, to me, this is still a quote modern movie that's 40 years old. But yes, I think it keeps on giving, so I could deal with a 9.5.
All right, then we turn to our last negotiable category, which isn't really negotiable, as this is based primarily on subjectivity. So with rewatchability, insert your own subjective test here. The original rewatchability score on this was a 6. Dad, were we right or wrong?
I have 6 again, so I think we were right.
Let's turn to our guest then.
6 seems so low to me, because to me, yes, this film is infinitely watchable. And even my husband, who doesn't like horror movies, who even I said to him, "Oh, Alien is replaying in the movie theater." He says, "Let me know when it's Aliens. I'll go see Aliens. At least that has fun. There's entertainment. There's rewatchability to it." I mean, even he agrees. So, I'd like to say an 8, maybe. So there's room to negotiate, because I realize some people may find things silly or dated or not be interested in the whole lore of the genre. Or people still, do I have to see the first one before I see this one? No, you don't. I think this film, continually gives. I think the more you watch it, the better it gets.
I'm going to give this a slight benefit of the doubt in that knowing we potentially added so many scenes to that first hour, I was going to grade this a little further down because the first hour just seems so slow. And it's a 2.5-hour movie that's an action film that you have to wait for most of the action for at least 60 or more minutes. But on the possibility that there's just a bunch of stuff that was added and it's not part of the core film that I feel like more people are more likely to watch, I think this is an objective 8, given the appetite for horror in the general population right now compared to where Dana and I are at. And so because most of my scores are trying to be more of the objective baseline as opposed to my own personal feelings, where I feel like this category was at a 6 before, partially because of me. I think I had it at a 4 and Dana had it at a 6 and like Rob had it at an 8. I have nothing to base that on because I did not go back and re-listen to this. But I think this is actually at an 8 from an objective standpoint because not everybody's a gold-dipped wuss weenie like I am. And so because we average this category out instead of just simply trying to negotiate, given that it's so subjective instead, this is going to be a 7.33 average between the three of us, which does move it up slightly.
Better. Yeah, that's better. Yeah. I mean, I'm the kind of person, to torment people. Come on, sister, come watch this. My nieces and my sister screaming, are you making them watch Aliens? I'm like, but it's okay. They're watching, they're enjoying it. It's okay. While they're screaming and like, oh, but that was exciting. That was a good scene. But they're like, no, we still don't like it. It's still too scary. There's still too much grossness. No. And I'm like, that's the point. The sickness, the sinews. I do feel maybe where this fits, where are we wording it correctly? You guys have only seen it a few times, and yet you remember a lot of it. That I feel like there's a lot of memorable things to it, or there are unforgettable things to it. Even if you don't like it, there's something that still sticks with you with this movie. It's sticky. It gets under your skin,
I thought it just hugged my face, but okay. Regardless, that takes us to our final category, which is more influenced than the last time because only recently did Google apparently take away all of their user ratings, so we can't use that as our baseline anymore. In the original version or the original episode of this show on this film, we had a 91% for Google users and a 94% for Rotten Tomato users for a 9.25. The Rotten Tomato score did not change. It is still a 94%, but because we have to now substitute in the IMDb score for the Google score, we have that at an 8.4, making the average an 8.9, which drops it a few points, or at least a few, tenths of point? Yeah. So to repeat the categories from where we had here, for Legacy, we moved from a 9.33 to a 9.5. Impact and Significance, we moved up from an 8.5 to a 9. On Novelty, we went down from an 8.33 to a 7.5. On Classicness, we moved from an 8.83 to a 9.5. On Rewatchability, we went from a 6 to a 7.33. And for Audience Score, we had to move from a 9.25 to an 8.9. The original total score on this film, back from 2021 when we did our first episode, was a 50.24, currently placing it at number 69 on our list. And behind the original film, Alien, which currently places at number 50 on the list. Does anyone have any guesses where this might rank or what the adjusted score might be before we tally this out?
I think we went up to about a 51.5.
It's not bad. You're not far off.
That's funny.
And I think we probably climbed about 30 spaces or spots.
So yet again, very good. But ultimately, this ends up at a 51.73. And it moves it into a joint tie with two other films at numbers 41 and 42 in Three Idiots, a fond memory film that we did several years ago in season 3, and Good Will Hunting. So interesting bedfellows, to say the least. It also moves it exactly 7 spots or more ahead of the original Alien, which I now feel like people will be requesting that we also revisit, as this continues to lasso back and forward. So you guessed 30 spots that it had moved. It roughly is moving about 27, 28, so you were very close. And you had a 51.5. It was a 51.73, also very close. So your math tonight, spot on.
I don't do math.
But that being said, if you have any commentary for us, good, bad, or otherwise, you can find us at one of three places, either at our email address, greatestaltimemoviepodcast@gmail.com. You can find us on our website, RonnieDuncanStudios.com/GModePodcast. That's Ronnie with a Y. Or at any of our socials at GModePodcast, where we're basically on every platform but Snapchat because Snapchat is stupid. But otherwise, we don't really do remaining questions on these revisits. I really don't have any that probably couldn't be answered by the subsequent films that I really don't have any interest in watching at this point. So with that being said,
I do have one.
You have one.
The
He got
creature
one.
the creature leaves the spaceship and is screaming. Since there is no actual ability to have sound in space,
I had a huge bevy of questions on the original episode that I will direct people back towards, because one of those is very similar. The entire airlock is open.
Yes.
And how are they
Everything's
breathing?
being sucked out. Yes. Yes.
It makes no fucking sense. But okay.
Yes, I go through that every time. Where yes, it's like she's hanging on to like the railing, and that's supposed to be enough to, as like the alien lets go, and then there goes her little sneaker out in space, and she can still climb up, and then that Horner score kicks in, and I'm like, okay, yeah, all right. And they're like, they reuse that Horner score in a lot of other things, and every time I hear it, I think of, remember that preposterous airlock where Ripley was so badass that she could still breathe and press that button.
But also, space doesn't operate like a airplane where you just get sucked out like that.
The pressure sucks out.
Because once the pressure is initially gone, there's really nothing there. So it's not just going to continue to try and suck you out. There's so many physics issues with this movie. Like, I think that if you asked Neil deGrasse Tyson, he'd have an absolute field day. But that's not really the point of the movie.
No, at that point it does not matter. I mean, we've already had
reminiscent of the original Airport film where the bomb goes off and the people get sucked out of the fuselage. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But otherwise, hearing no other additional remaining questions, I'd like to thank our guest for being back with us for her third time. You're not currently scheduled to be back with us yet this season, but please remind the people again what you're working on and where they can find you.
Therefore, review on Blue Sky, Mostly Causing Trouble.
Fair enough. Dad, final thoughts for the week?
I don't have any, other than the fact that I am looking forward to The Odyssey.
Yes, that is coming in about 2 weeks. I will say, I'm looking forward to a Marvel film that actually won't be made directly by Marvel and may actually be good, in Spider-Man, in addition to The Odyssey. I'm looking forward to both of them. But then again, I also said I was looking forward to Disclosure Day and Toy Story, and I haven't seen either of those because, well, I've just had too much else going on. And technically, I've got finals coming up, even though I'm not taking an actual exam. But I've got some stuff in the near future that's going to take up some time. We've got a bunch of irons in the fire at the office, so it's going to be kind of an interesting moment, to say the least. But we do have both of my sisters on for next week's episode to discuss one of their favorite movies as children. And it's going to be an interesting summer, to say the least, because we have Legally Blonde, then we have Spirited Away, which Dana's only experience with anime was when we covered Your Name a few years ago. So dipping his toe in the water with Miyazaki is going to be something. Then we got Princess Diaries. And next month we've got Alice in Wonderland. And I think somewhere in the next couple of months we have like Zoolander, and I don't know. The schedule is crazy this year, particularly
I've
the
never
summer.
seen Alice in Wonderland.
The original film.
Correct.
Or the original animated
Even though
version?
when I was a very little boy, I had the record, the 33 1/3 album.
See, hear,
of
read. Yes.
all the Disney songs. and Alice in Wonderland and Cinderella and all of those were on there. So yes.
I have to admit, I've never in full seen the entirety of the Disney animated Alice in Wonderland. Part of the reason for putting it on the list, which we will have a mashup of two people that have never been on an episode together, but are our two most frequent guests, Kieran B. and my mother. What can go wrong?
Ooh. Yeah.
That's going to be trippy. Yeah.
I think Mom is on 3 out of 4 weeks, like at the end of August into September. So people are going to have to get used to her, but
It's like your female summer. So, yeah, embrace it. Embrace it.
But otherwise, I think that's going to do it for us this week. Thank you for listening. I do wish we could chat longer, but I'm having an old friend for dinner. Next week, for our 320th episode, we discuss Legally Blonde from 2001, celebrating its 25th anniversary. Directed by Robert Lukatich, written by Karen McCullough Lutz and Kirsten Smith, music by Rolf Kent, editing by Anita Brandt Burgoyne, starring Reese Witherspoon, Luke Wilson, Selma Blair, Victor Garber, and Ali Larder. You won't want to miss that one, so watch ahead of the show by searching the Real Good app to find where it's streaming for you. That's REELGOOD. Please like, follow, rate, and review, or whatever on whichever platform you have so that more can join in on our fun. You can also email the show at RonnieDuncanStudios.com or at greatestaltimemovie@gmail.com, or find us on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, Letterboxd, Blue Sky, Threads, or TikTok at the handle @GMOPodcast. Greatest Movie of All Time is a production of Ronnie Duncan Studios. Our show is mixed, edited, and written by Thomas Duncan. Our music is thanks to Purple Planet Music. Our distributor is Captivate FM. Our technical provider is Riverside FM.